My name is Cecilia. I'm a 29-year-old company employee, and this means I'm getting older. Still, I met Andrew, a year older than me, through friends, and we decided to marry 6 months after we started dating. Andrew, who made a name for himself in tennis during his student days, is an active person who continues to play tennis even now. As I was in the tennis club during my student days, we immediately found common ground. Once we started dating, we would often play tennis together on the weekends. One day after our date, Andrew proposed to me, and we decided to get married. It's been almost 3 years since we got married. We don't have children, but we bought an apartment after getting married and have been living together ever since. Both of us work, and while we aren't struggling financially, we can't say that we're wealthy either. We're living a happy life. However, something happened that shattered my peaceful days. One day, Andrew suddenly asked me to come to his parents' house. Surprised, I hurried there to find Andrew, his parents, and an unknown woman waiting for me. As I struggled to understand the situation, Andrew suddenly knelt down and said, "Cecilia, I'm truly sorry. The truth is I've been involved with this woman here, Heather. Last week, we found out that Heather is pregnant. I feel responsible for her and the baby, so I think it's better that we separate. I'm sorry, but I want a divorce." Andrew shocked me with this revelation, exposing his infidelity, the pregnancy, and facing his demands for divorce. I was stunned. That was when my mother-in-law spoke to me. "Cecilia, please forgive Andrew. Yes, he cheated, but the problem lies with you too. You and Andrew weren't really a good match from the beginning, so I'm sorry, but please forget about him," she declared. Then my father-in-law added, "Heather's father is an executive at a major company, a man in a totally different position from someone like your poor father. I think you know who's more suitable for our son." I couldn't believe it. Andrew's father belittled not only me, but also my father. Normally, parents would put the blame on their son for cheating, but Andrew's parents didn't seem to think that way. Instead, they seemed to think it was natural for us to divorce, and that their son had done nothing wrong. I took the divorce papers and said, "I understand what you all want to say. Being with people who have such warped thoughts might affect me too. I'm shocked at how you make it seem like I'm the villain despite Andrew's infidelity. Don't worry, I'll file these divorce papers myself. I'll leave the rest to a lawyer." With that, I quickly left the scene. As I left, my father-in-law mockingly uttered, "Poor person, hiring a lawyer. What a waste of time and money when she doesn't even have any. She shouldn't bite off more than she can chew. Ha ha ha." Ignoring him, I left his parents' house and immediately went to City Hall to file the divorce papers. At least I was able to end my marriage with Andrew. The next day, surprisingly, Andrew and Heather came to my apartment. "Oh, you're still here. You haven't even packed your things. You're taking your time, aren't you?" Andrew asked in surprise. Hearing this, Heather also looked at me curiously. I was furious at Andrew's words. "What are you talking about? You're the one who should be taking it slow. This is my house, so you should be the one to leave. The movers are coming soon to take all your belongings to your parents' house. If there's anything you don't want them to touch, you should take it now," I retorted. Hearing this, Andrew suddenly panicked. "What? This is my house. The ownership should be in my name," he exclaimed. I was dumbfounded. After all, this apartment was bought in my name. I had already told Andrew about this and about my family's background before we got married, but it seems that Andrew is the type to conveniently forget things that don't suit him. Perhaps this carefree nature is why he was easily swayed by Heather. I showed the deed to the apartment, and my name was clearly written on it. Andrew's face quickly changed upon seeing it. Meanwhile, Heather's face began to cloud over with anger. "Andrew, what is this all about? This is completely different from what you told me before. Were you deceiving me?" Heather began to confront him. "This is strange. What's happening?" Andrew responded in confusion. "That's not an answer. Explain yourself." Heather pressed on. "First, this is my house, so please take your argument outside. And just so you know, Andrew has various debts, so if you're planning to marry him, be prepared for that burden." I calmly stated the facts to Heather. Hearing this, Heather seemed about to say something, but I didn't care and kicked both of them out, slamming the door behind them. After a while, I could hear them arguing outside the door, but it eventually quieted down. About an hour later, the movers finally arrived and took all of Andrew's belongings to his parents' house. The room was now clean, and I was relaxing in the newly organized space, but it was short-lived. Suddenly, the intercom rang repeatedly. I cautiously opened the door with the chain lock still on, and my mother-in-law was standing there. "Hello, is there something you need?" I asked. "Cecilia, why did you keep such an important thing a secret?" she questioned. "What are you talking about?" I was puzzled. "I can't believe it, but Andrew just told me that this apartment is in your name, and that your parents are the owners of that famous restaurant chain," she continued, clearly in shock. It seemed Andrew finally remembered my family's circumstances. "What about it?" I asked coldly. "If I had known, I would never have let this divorce happen. A daughter from such a wealthy family, we would love to have you back in our family." "Cecilia, please reconsider and start over with Andrew," she pleaded. I was shocked and at a loss for words at her outrageous request. I couldn't possibly agree to what she was asking. "You really have a terrible way of thinking about things. Am I not a human being? Are you only interested in money? I'm sorry, but I don't want anything more to do with you." "There's nothing more to talk about, so please leave," I said and attempted to close the door. But my mother-in-law, infuriated by my attitude, raised her voice in anger. "Don't be so arrogant. I'm giving you my permission to reconcile your differences. Fix things with him right now. I won't leave this spot until you agree to get back together. Open this door immediately," she yelled, pounding on the door repeatedly. I decided that I couldn't handle this alone and called the police. They came and took my mother-in-law away. Even as the officers were taking her, she was shouting something loudly, but I no longer cared to listen to her words. There was a reason why my in-laws were unaware of my family's business background. My father, coming from a poor background since childhood, continued to live modestly. Even after becoming a company president, he never considered buying branded clothes. He always took great care of his belongings and used them for a long time. Hence, at our wedding, he wore a suit he had bought decades ago. Seeing this, my in-laws assumed that my father was not financially well off and misunderstood his restaurant chain as a small privately owned business. As a result, they never delved deeper into my father's business. Time went by without them understanding the true circumstances of my family. Days after managing to send my mother-in-law home, Andrew tried to persuade me to reconcile our differences. His persistence was incredibly exhausting. It was surprising how insistent he was, despite the fact that he was the one who proposed the divorce. He seems to have a talent for quickly forgetting inconvenient truths. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock on, and Andrew, upon seeing me, began to speak with teary eyes. "Cecilia, please, let's give it another try. Everything is my fault. I'm truly sorry. I still love you. Let's be together again," he pleaded. He then explained a sudden turn of events. Heather had apparently approached Andrew, aiming to get his house, pretending to be pregnant to sway him. However, once she learned about Andrew's considerable debts, she gave up and fled. And now my husband was coming to me to seek reconciliation. "Huh? What are you saying? I don't know anything about that. How can you say that?" I snapped, unable to hide my disbelief. After you cheated and brought up divorce, now that she's left you, you want to get back together? There's no limit to your audacity. I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever come here again." I angrily added, refusing Andrew right then and there. Surprisingly, he quietly left. However, this was not to be their last attempt. Days later, Andrew's entire family unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. They were shouting, "Bring out Cecilia. Get that woman out here. We know she's here causing chaos in the office, leading to the security guards being called." I stood there dumbfounded by the situation, but they wouldn't have things their way any longer. I worked at the headquarters of my father's company, and that day my father was also in the office. All of my colleagues supported me. "Hey, what are you doing? This is my company. Don't just barge in and make a scene. I know everything you did to demean my daughter. Don't ever come near her again, and never set foot in this company again." My usually calm father shouted furiously at my ex-in-laws. Everyone, including the employees and Andrew's family, must have been surprised at the anger of my father, who usually only showed his gentle and calm side. Sorry. We're really sorry," Andrew's family desperately apologized. My father's stern words had immediately quieted them down as they were being escorted out by security. "Don't you ever come here again and never do something like this again. I won't allow it, you understand," my father bellowed as they left. Hearing this, I couldn't stop myself from crying. I felt a deep sense of gratitude that my father had gotten so angry for my sake. Later, through the company's legal advisor, I decided to seek damages from Andrew's family. I sought damages for the divorce due to Andrew's infidelity, for his persistent attempts at reconciliation after the divorce, and for the disturbance at my workplace. The total amount was substantial, and I eventually received payment from them. I'd also made them sign a written agreement promising never to come before me again. Andrew's family's state of affairs rapidly declined thereafter. Chased by the money owed to me and my ex-husband's existing debts, my in-laws ended up selling their home and moving to another part of town. The story spread that Andrew had committed adultery, divorced his wife, and after being abandoned by his mistress, attempted to reconcile. Facing such embarrassment, they could no longer stay in this town. While I felt a bit of sympathy for them, I also knew that everything was a consequence of their actions, so it was clearly deserved. Andrew's family never appeared before me again. Finally, I was able to resume my peaceful days. However, my father had harsh words for me as well regarding what had happened. "Cecilia," he began, "you should have recognized before the marriage that Andrew was the type of person who would commit adultery and accrue debts. Certainly, while Andrew was at fault, my lack of insight was also partly to blame. Unable to argue with my father, I felt disappointed and disillusioned with marriage. I felt that I needed to give my heart a break. However, about a year later, I decided to marry my colleague Amr. Amr was sincere and earnest in his work, trusted by everyone. I was initially attracted by his personality, but as we started dating, I was also drawn to his lifestyle. His life was surprisingly simple. He never indulged in branded items, used everyday things for a long time, but generously spent money and spoiled me on dates. His behavior was very similar to my father's. My father, who usually saves money, would splurge on family trips, bringing us joy. I deeply loved and respected my father. Realizing Amir's actions were similar to my father's, I felt that I could be happy with him in the future. Therefore, I decided to marry Amir. I was worried about being scolded by my father for remarrying within a year of my divorce, but his reaction was surprisingly positive, probably because he had heard of Amir's reputation at work and knew of his character. There was nothing bad said about Amir, and from my father's perspective, as the company president, Amir seemed to be performing exceptionally well. I feel confident that Amir will take good care of you, Cecilia, my father told me happily. Amir and I were happily married. Not long after our marriage, we discovered that I was with a child. The happiest person to hear this news was undoubtedly my father. I was so glad to see my father happy, reflecting on my time with Andrew, where we didn't have children even after 3 years of marriage. It seemed like a stroke of luck. Amir and I plan to take over the company in the future. We are currently learning the basics of management from my father. Although there are many challenges, we accept that they are our responsibility as successors, and we are working hard together. We believe that we will need even more effort for the sake of our upcoming child. Despite all that's happened, I am now very happy together with my family. We intend to firmly support this company in the future.